division.
Mm.
Let's start with the champ, or the guy that retired as champion, Khabib. Is he coming back?
No, I didn't think he was coming back the day he announced it. You don't say something that you don't, in that culture, there's far too many, I think, there's far too many Westerners applying Western logic to a very different mentality that Khabib has. And everyone's saying, oh, they'll throw money at him. Well, he's kind of shown he's not that bothered about money to some extent. He's more interested in legacy and, his standing with his people. So, and the fact that he said that he was making this decision because of a promise to his mother in that culture, I'm sorry, but throwing a couple of extra million at him, I never thought that would entice him back. And, as a lot of people have said, when I hear it from Khabib that he's thinking about coming back, and not Dana or not his manager, whose name suddenly escapes me.
Ali Abdelaziz.
Ali Abdelaziz, yes. Yeah, doesn't mean anything. It has to come from Khabib. So I think he is 100% retired. What about you?
So I'm kind of with you a little bit there. So I agree with most of what you said. The only difference is I'd say he made that decision. He had that conversation with his mum during a highly emotional period in his life. And in the ring, in the octagon, after beating Justin Gaethje, obviously he showed his emotion for the first time in that manner with the tears that flowed and stuff like that. So I think the only reason I would have said, you know what, he might come back is because one of the things that he spoke about multiple times was the 30-0 being the holy grail. I'm going to get to 30-0 and I'm going to retire. And that was the wish of his, now deceased father. So it was a bit of a conflict in him, I suppose. This is what his dad wanted and this is what his mum currently wants. So I thought that there was room for potential change of heart because the plan always was the 30-0, but I totally agree with you that money was never going to change his kind of his plans or whatever. But I did say previously that I wouldn't be surprised if he's made an offer that he can't refuse in terms of a big, massive bumper payday. Just because he probably thinks, you know what, with that money, I can do so much in my own community. I can help people. He can use that money as a charitable kind of effort rather than just to buy 3 Ferraris in different colors. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I thought, money might kind of be able to kind of tempt him back. But one thing
Sorry, I was just going to say, what about instead of the cold hard cash? He's just bought an MMA promotion and renamed it Eagle MMA or something like that, I think. Well, rather than the actual money, what about the legacy, that side of things? Okay, we'll make Eagle MMA an official feeder to the UFC. You'll be providing careers for a load of your countrymen, and doing a money setup that way instead of actually just giving him a few extra suitcases.
Yeah, exactly. So something along those lines where he'd be incentivized around something that actually matters to him, because you and I suppose, both agree that money in his own personal bank, his own personal wealth, isn't really something he's too focused on because he's already achieved what he set out to achieve. But what I did find funny is all of this talk about someone needs to impress him. Well, Dustin Poirier was the first person to ever knock Conor McGregor out, and Chandler made his UFC debut and knocked his opponent out in the first round. Both of them, I'd say, were very, very impressive on fight night. So I don't really know what it was that, if Khabib wanted to be impressed. I was impressed with what happened. What I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, what was he looking for then if he wasn't impressed by what happened on Saturday night?
I doubt he even said it. I doubt he even said that. I think that's a complete figment of Dana's emotional imagination.
Exactly.
Maybe it would have been, it's one of those reported speech incidents where Dana said, will you at least watch the pay-per-view on Saturday? And then we can talk again. What about that? Is that all right? Mm-hmm. And then Khabib says, yeah, okay, fair enough. And he goes, you see, Khabib said, show me something on Saturday. So, I don't think he even probably said it. But the other thing is, you said if he's going to go to 30, you want, if father's plan was to get to 30 now, then okay, maybe that could be the thing that entices him back. But who would be the opponents that would be worth coming back for?
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad because this is what I wanted to kind of come to during this kind of part of the show. He's clearly shown that he's not impressed or not very he's not tempted to come back to fight any of the lightweights currently on the roster. One person that he's continually talked about is a certain GSP. And I think now here's the trade-off. Dana White kind of, you could tell before Saturday night was desperate for a Khabib against Conor McGregor too, because all he could see was dollar signs. Now that fight's dead at the moment anyway, because Conor's got some rebuilding to do this year.
Yeah.
I think now is a good time for Khabib to go back to that conversation around GSP, because one of the things that Dana White was adamant about is he was like, he was quizzed about, right, you always say when a fighter talks about retirement, you don't try and convince him to come back or her to come back. And Dana White, and I actually agree with this with Dana White, he goes, I've done it with two people, DC and Khabib, because I felt that both of them were leaving too early and they still had plenty more to give and they were still at their peak. And I definitely agree with Khabib, him saying that about Khabib at this moment. So yeah, fair enough. But if he's if his only motive and his only interest is to see Khabib come back and fight, then surely a fight against GSP, now that Khabib has relinquished his lightweight title, surely a fight, just an attraction fight against GSP, which will obviously generate loads and loads of money. Surely now, like, there shouldn't be any resistance from the UFC for this fight, you know, a GSP Khabib fight, should there?
Big question. Yeah, it's Dana last said, didn't he, that when they had the chat that GSP wasn't even on the table, wasn't discussed.
Mm-hmm.
So that was prior to the pay-per-view. So it was previously, we know that he's talked about that with Dana previously, but in the recent conversations Dana's had with Khabib, GSP was not on the agenda to talk about. So it would then mean, like you say, I think Khabib would have to say, okay, if you want me back for one more, it has to be against GSP or nothing. But then there's the issue of the weight. Do you do that at 155? Do you do that? Because that would maybe take some shine off the belt. So do you do it at a catch weight in an organization that historically doesn't like catch weight fights, unless it's because of people missing weight, of course?
Yeah.
There's certainly, Dana seems beholden not to start a 165 division as much as all the athletes seem to want one. So yeah, I could see Khabib, but that all depends. That all is predicated on the fact that Khabib would then say, okay, I will come back for one more. And he hasn't shown any inkling whatsoever that he wants to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But I just think prior, when they spoke about GSP previously, is when Khabib was a UFC fighter, and you know, during the time he was a champion. If he's removed himself from all of that, and if his thing, you know, if his one condition is, I'll come back, Dana, if you really want me back, I'll come back for GSP. That's the only fight I want. That's the only fight I care about. Other than that, don't call me. I don't know whether Dana would chop his nose off to spite his face in that instance, to say, you know what, fuck it, we're going to make shitloads of money, let's do it, sort of thing. Like you say, obviously there's a number of different things that need to be agreed, because I would hate for, you know, Dana to agree to that and GSP to, sorry, and Khabib to be adamant that it's at lightweight. I don't, you know, I don't want to see GSP come back at lightweight, and I don't think he would. But 165, I don't know, but I think that's a weight that GSP would probably be able to make and be comfortable at. And that's probably, if that was to get booked for June or July or something this year, how excited would you be for that fight? That would literally be the two greatest of this generation, really.
Yeah, enormously so. Just to see how the, I don't think anyone's ever said this before. Are you ready? Just to see how the wrestling versus wrestling turns out. Because with a lot of people, that's the boring part of MMA, isn't
Yeah.
it? For some people, anyway. But yeah, just to see how those exchanges would work, that'd be fascinating.
Well, that was part of the fascination a little bit for the Gaethje fight, because we were just getting told how good of a wrestler Gaethje is, and all American and all of this, that, and the other, and he'll be ready for Khabib if Khabib tries to take him down, and that was a non-entity, wasn't it? But yeah.
Very disappointing.
But funny I mentioned Gaethje actually, because the lightweight division, now that we've between us decided that Khabib's never coming back.
So it shall be.
So how would you book the lightweight division moving forward then? Say we have to crown the champion by the end of this year, right? So you can have a title fight next, you can have it right at the end. How would you book this?
Well, can I start with what they should have done?
Mm-hmm.
Because they kind of screwed it up by not making Saturday for the belt now, especially because of the result, of course. It makes even more sense after the event, doesn't it? But the good thing for this is I'm glad I'm not Sean Shelby, or is it Hunter Campbell? Yeah. But this is one of those kind of situations where you can't do any wrong, I think, because every top 10 fight that you could organize in the lightweight division is just mental. It'd just be great, and people would be queuing up in droves to watch them. Poirier is the champ in all but actual belt around his waist, isn't he? Let's be honest. I mentioned it earlier. You don't want to give someone a title without having fought for it, like Lennox Lewis got the WBC after Riddick put it in the bin, because it always takes the shine off. Poirier is a guy that needs building, not giving critics an excuse to demean or belittle him. So really, you've got, as the main players in this, you've obviously got Poirier, Gaethje, who seems to be the forgotten man from who people are talking about should be in the mix-up, because lest we forget, yes, it was massively disappointing, but he's effectively the last person to have fought for the title.
Yep.
So before Saturday, he had the same kind of claim as Poirier did. He fought for the title and lost, And Oliveira.
Sorry, they're both interim champions. They're both interim champions. So Poirier and Gaethje both took the interim title into a unification fight with Khabib and both lost. But yeah, continue.
No, they both had very different reactions to having got the belt in the octagon as well, didn't they? One said, "I chucked it to the floor and said I'll wait for the real one." You might be waiting a while, Justin.
I bet you he regrets that.
Yeah, probably, but yeah. So yeah, some of the players there. I'll tell you another guy that I think, this probably sounds quite harsh. I don't mean he's overrated. I don't mean he's overrated at all. But whenever a couple of comments that always annoy me when people say things in MMA is he hasn't lost since 2017. Well, how many fights has he had?
Yeah.
And who has he beaten? Because if he was on, I don't know, UFC Brussels, or Fight Night 143 from Boise, Idaho, against Johnny No Name, then it doesn't mean as much.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and I'm not saying any of that. I'm talking ridiculously for effect here, obviously. But if you look at Oliveira's record, Oliveira's a guy that's been talked up as well. He has to fight for the title. He's on an X-fight winning streak. Well, have you looked at who his victories are since he lost to Paul Felder in December 17?
He's had, I know his last two is what I've taken notice of. Before then, I didn't even realize he'd gone up to lightweight.
I wrote them down here. So you've got, so we beat Ferguson, great win, dominated him, obviously. Kevin Lee, my friends and I always have a bit of a joke about Kevin Lee, because I always say that he has never heard a lesson that he hasn't ignored in the next 5 minutes. He seems to be one of those very hard to coach people. Never capitalizes on his own strengths and willfully ignores his corner advice at every turn. But he beat Kevin Lee and dominated him too. But then he beat Jared Gordon before that, Nick Lentz, Tamur, Jim Miller, Giagos, and Clay Guida. So it's hardly a murderer's row of top 10 guys that he's beaten. Yes, it's any kind of win streak is great and impressive, but it's not like his CV of recent opponents matches Poirier's, is it? Or even Hooker's.
Yeah. No, I appreciate what you're saying. I think what it is with Charlie Olives, aka Charles Oliveira, is it's more the manner in which he beat Kevin Lee and then Tony Ferguson, because he showed in the Kevin Lee the improvement in his striking, and that's something where the general consensus going into that fight was an advantage on the feet was for Kevin Lee, and going to the ground off his back. Or kind of in mountain position with Kevin Lee, that's where Oliveira would win the fight. But he lit him up on the feet, Charles Oliveira did. And then against Tony Ferguson, again, that was a dominant, 30-27. Well, it was a 3-round. Yeah, it was a 3-round, a 30-27 win. So I just think it was more the manner in which he won those fights, and he showed new kind of new skills that he'd acquired in a short kind of space of time. I'd put it that way. But Kevin Lee's a guy that flatters to deceive a lot of the time. Like you say, he doesn't really fight. I mean, the amount of times, like 3 or 4 years ago, I heard that Kevin Lee is a future UFC champion. I still don't see. Yeah, I still don't see it.
No, I don't.
And then Tony Ferguson, I don't know whether he is the Tony Ferguson that we knew and loved. I don't know whether he's lost a step now, and whether
after the Gaethje fight.
Yeah, but even before the Gaethje fight, because the way he looked against Gaethje and the way he's now looked against Oliveira, I don't know whether it was a result of the Gaethje fight or whether he actually just kind of had grown old overnight before the Gaethje fight came along, and then the Gaethje fight happened and he lost, and then he lost against Oliveira. I don't know whether he's just going to go on a slide now. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is it feels like the perception of Oliveira is he's bigger and better than what he's actually, like you say, achieved and attained in the octagon. But anyway, continue. So who would you book in for a title shot now?
Well, I think the smart money seems to be on Chandler Poirier, doesn't it? But Poirier is not keen. So, like going back to what you said earlier about how much Poirier is promoted depends on how much he's willing to play ball. Well, if I was Dana, I'd be saying, okay, this one is for the belt. You want to be the title holder, the champ. It's against Chandler. But the thing with that is that Poirier might well pivot and say, well, okay, I'll take Nate Diaz in an attraction fight. He might do that. But if it were me, I'd actually like to see, just to be different, I'd like to see a Poirier Gaethje rematch for those reasons that we said before. The first one was an absolute banger. It was just amazing damage on both sides. But like you said, they both were interim title holders. So there's an ethical argument to be made there as well, isn't there? That these are the people most recently deserving. So I'd like to see that, but I think they'd probably go for Poirier Chandler. What do you think?
I'm not going to pretend this is one of my own thoughts. I heard Ariel Helwani say this. I can't remember on what show, but he was talking about Dustin Poirier and his kind of resistance to potentially fighting Chandler for a belt. And Poirier's reasoning during the press conference was, what's he done? He's come in and he's won a fight against a guy that I beat previously. I don't think that should give him the right to fight for the belt. I think he needs to go and beat someone else. And I'm not interested in fighting Chandler for the belt. I'm the champion as it is anyway. He kind of, referring to himself as a champion. But Ariel Helwani basically said that might be residue from the whole situation with Tony Ferguson, like I touched on earlier, because if you remember, Chandler was inserted into that kind of, so there was a two-way negotiation going on between the UFC and Poirier and Ferguson were on the same side, and they were both trying to make sure that they were both looked after, for them to fight. And Chandler was inserted, and Poirier was offered that fight against Chandler, and that kind of scuppered the fight with Ferguson, because Chandler, they both just said, no, we're not fighting Chandler. So it might be the reason why he doesn't want to fight China isn't so much that he doesn't deserve it. It's because he's the guy that came in and pissed on that parade effectively. And by the way, Poirier was talking about, I'd fight Nate Diaz or I'd fight Conor McGregor again. It's almost as if that relationship with the UFC hasn't been repaired.
No.
And a lot of this paid in full, and some of the things that he some of the mottos he comes out with. On one hand, it's kind of to do with his career and the way he's progressed, and he's worked for every single cent and dollar that he's earned. But also, I think it's also to do with the business side of things. And he feels that he's been wronged in a couple of fights, and he feels like he hasn't been paid what he deserves. So every single penny he's earned is basically he's had to physically fight for. And he feels like he should have been paid a lot more up until this date than he has been. That's just my
Who can disagree? Who can disagree that he's been underpaid? But even more worrying, which they kind of glossed, they reiterated on the commentary team, but they kind of glossed over for the second part of what he said. Do you recall what he said through the cage to the commentary team as soon as he won?
I don't like this, man.
I don't like this anymore as much anymore.
Yeah,
I'm not into this as much.
I don't like this anymore, but I'm just good at it.
But I'm a dog.
Yeah,
I'm a dog. So then you had DC really making a big deal of, but he's a dog. Talk about the fact that he's a fighter. He's a real fighter's fighter.
He's from Lafayette.
Yeah, of course. But the fact that he said, I don't love this anymore, or I don't like this as much as I used to, or something to that effect. That's a bit worrying. If you're the UFC and you're about to stick a title on him.
But this is also going back. I don't know whether it's the training or the fighting. So sorry, I don't know if it's the training or the fighting he's referring to. I feel like it was he spoke openly about how he didn't enjoy the week leading up to the fight, the media engagements, all of the stuff around it, press conferences, and doing Zoom calls with whoever he had to do calls with. But he did say he enjoys fighting. And it feels like he puts in the work to say that, he enjoys training, or at least what he like Nick Diaz said, you have to love this so much that you begin to hate it. He's either in that spot or he just loves it because it shows in the octagon, right? I feel like it's everything else that he doesn't like anymore. I feel like it's,
and he goes away from home too.
Yeah,
he goes away from Louisiana to go into Florida, away from his wife and child. So that's clearly difficult for him too.
But then the strained relationship with the UFC, where every time you're trying to book yourself a fight, you think you should be getting X amount. You know how much the organization are making, and they're not willing to play ball with you. I think that starts to grate on you, man. That starts to grate on you. But going back to the subject at hand, if it was up to me, I think I'd go with you, to be honest. I think Gaethje against Poirier is not just a fight with two guys that are, I suppose, at the moment, the most deserving for the belt, but also a fight that is going to be fucking entertaining for us, because the first one was. So I definitely like to see that one again. So that would, I'd agree with that. I'd love to see Charles Oliveira fight Chandler in what could be a number one contender fight. And then that leaves Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, who's been piping up a bit recently, talking about different fights, etc., to do it for a third time. That's what I'd like to see over the next few months. Personally,
that works perfectly. It's like a perfect jigsaw puzzle put together, isn't it? The six of them. But would you agree that the worst thing Poirier could do right now, next, is rematch Conor McGregor? There's no win for him there. If he beats him again, what does it do for him? But if he loses, he's back to where he was.
Yeah. Apart from the fact that the only thing that I can think of is financially, that might be the biggest fight out there for him.
That's a small, that small thing. Yeah, I forgot about that one. That's a good point.
Because I feel like he's coming towards, I wouldn't say the end of his career, but he's probably got 3 to 5 fights left, if that. And and I feel like at this moment he's got the most leverage in terms of negotiating a fight with Conor McGregor coming off a win, and it's a direct rematch. It's a fight that he doesn't. I mean, not that he has the power to say no, I don't have to give him that fight, but it doesn't really make sense for him unless it's for the title. But I think he could. He was the A side in this fight. You know, he came to the ring second. His name was first on the flyer, because he was a higher ranked fighter. So you'd think he'd be able to command a much higher payday, and the UFC would understand that this is probably going to be a big earner in terms of pay-per-view buys. And if he loses against someone else, does that all go away, sort of thing? And like we say, there's a lot of killers in that division. So yeah, it's interesting though. But I hope and I hope we've got some clarity now in terms of, you know, Khabib's just not coming back. So we've got to make a decision now. The UFC have to say, right, okay, well, this is who's fighting for the belt. Do you know what I mean? The time will tell. But okay, there's a couple of other things about Saturday night.